In the wake of AI kind of exploding into the creative atmosphere, I had a silly little question. Can they write a decent Christmas horror short story? I put 5 AI to the test with one simple prompt, all the exact same, only one chance. Create a Christmas horror short story. Let's see how they did. Up first, we have Microsoft CoPilot. So, the prompt, write a Christmas horror short story. Here's what it said. Alright, here we go. The Silent Night. It was Christmas Eve, and the small town of Everwood was blanketed in a thick layer of snow. The streets were empty, save for the occasional flicker of Christmas lights that adorned the houses. Inside one of these homes, the Johnson family was gathered around the fireplace, enjoying the warmth and the festive spirit. Little Timmy, excited for Santa's arrival, couldn't sleep. He tiptoed downstairs, hoping to catch a glimpse of the jolly man in red. As he reached the living room, he noticed something strange. The Christmas tree, usually vibrant and full of life, seemed to be wilting. The ornaments hung lifelessly, and the lights flickered erratically. Timmy's eyes widened as he saw a shadowy figure standing by the tree. It wasn't Santa. The figure was tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. It turned slowly, revealing a sinister grin. Timmy wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure reached out a bony hand, and the room grew colder. The fireplace extinguished, and the once cozy home was now filled with an eerie silence. The figure whispered, "I've come for the children who don't believe." Timmy's heart raced as he backed away, but the figure moved closer. Suddenly the front door burst open, and a gust of wind blew through the house. The figure vanished, leaving behind a chilling echo of its laughter. Timmy's parents rushed downstairs, finding him trembling by the tree. They tried to comfort him, but he knew the truth. The spirit of disbelief had visited their home, and it would return every Christmas Eve, searching for those who doubted the magic of the season. Now, I personally didn't think this was the worst story. It felt almost like whenever a new writer kind of enters the realm and they decide, oh, I'm going to really jazz it up with extra adjectives, way too much detail in the wrong kind of places. It does feel a little like too much at once, you know? There's not really a whole lot of build-up, but I guess it is a short horror story, so I can't really judge it too harshly. I'll be honest, I probably got to give that about a 3 out of 5. Up next, we have ChatGPT. So, yet again, same prompt, create a Christmas horror short story. This is called The Christmas Bells. It was Christmas Eve, and the small town of Pinewood Heights was blanketed in snow, its streets lit up by flickering streetlights and colorful decorations. The scent of pine wafted through the air, and families gathered inside their warm homes, eagerly awaiting the morning's festivities. But for Abigail, this Christmas would be different. She had come back to her childhood home, the house where she had spent every Christmas growing up, nestled on the outskirts of town. The house was old, its wooden beams creaking with age, and the fireplace crackled as she settled into the living room, staring at the tree she had once decorated with her parents. The tree stood tall, adorned with delicate glass ornaments and twinkling lights. A forgotten star rested on the floor, knocked off by the wind earlier in the night. Abigail felt an unsettling chill in the air, though the fireplace was lit. It was as though something in the house had changed. The shadows seemed longer than usual, and the house felt empty. Despite the decorations, she could still hear the echoes of laughter from past Christmases. But tonight, the silence was suffocating. Her parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and since then, Abigail hadn't been able to return to the house. It had always been too painful, too full of memories. But tonight, she had decided to come back. Maybe, she thought, it was time to face her past. As she sipped her hot cocoa, the wind outside howled, rattling the windows. Suddenly she heard it, soft, distant at first, but growing louder. The sound of bells, faint and eerie, ringing through the house. The old grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight. Abigail froze. She hadn't seen any bells in the house, and certainly not ones that would make such a noise. Slowly she stood up, her feet making no sound on the creaky wooden floors as she moved toward the hallway. The bells grew louder, now clearly coming from upstairs. Without thinking, Abigail began to climb the staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. She had never been afraid of the house before, but now, every creak of the wood beneath her feet sent a shiver down her spine. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before her, dark and cold. The sound of the bells was deafening now, a high-pitched jingle that felt almost wrong. It was like a melody she recognized, but something about it had shifted, turned sinister. She made her way to the door of her parents' bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and the dim light from the hallway cast long shadows across the room. As Abigail pushed the door open, her breath caught in her throat. The room was unchanged, just as she remembered. But there, in the center of the floor, was a large, ornate bell. It gleamed under the moonlight streaming through the window, its surface polished to a mirror-like shine. And around it, sprawled across the floor, were twisted, mangled Christmas stockings. Her parents' stockings, torn open as though someone had reached inside and ripped them apart. The bells jingled louder, almost frantically now, and Abigail felt her heart race. She turned to leave, but as she did, the door slammed shut behind her. A voice, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have come back." Abigail spun around. The bell on the floor had begun to shake, its surface warping as if it were alive. The room grew colder, the air thick with the scent of pine and rot. Her parents' faces appeared in the reflection of the bell, distorted and pale, their eyes wide open with terror. The voice came again, this time more forceful. "It's not Christmas without us." The bell let out a loud, bone-chilling jingle, and in that instant, Abigail's parents' ghostly forms seemed to rise from the floor, their mouths open in silent screams. The shadows of the room twisted and stretched, reaching for her with long skeletal hands. Abigail tried to scream, but no sound came out. She reached for the door handle, but her fingers passed right through it, as though it were made of smoke. The ghosts of her parents closed in on her, their cold, bony hands grazing her skin. The bells rang one final time, a shrill, mournful sound that filled her ears and made her head spin. And then, everything went still. The next morning, the snow continued to fall outside. The town of Pinewood Heights woke to a strange quiet. No one saw Abigail leave the house, and no one found her body. Her parents' house stood empty, its lights twinkling in the window. But if you listened closely, on Christmas Eve, just as the clock struck midnight, you could hear the faint sound of bells ringing from the old house. A soft jingle, barely audible, but enough to send a chill down your spine. And if you were unlucky enough to be nearby, you might hear the voice too. "You shouldn't have come back." Now, I found this one to be a little bit better, if I'm completely honest with you, so I'm definitely going to give it a 4 out of 5, but let me also kind of mention a couple of things that are a little odd about it, right? So the pacing is quite good. Some of the details don't fully, continue in the way you think they would. Like, first, the ringing of the bells is distant, but then all of a sudden it's just completely inside the house and deafening, which doesn't really make any sense. Like, there was only one bell inside. Also, the stockings all torn apart didn't really seem relevant at all, just kind of an unnecessary detail. And then her parents' spirits just come out of nowhere, and it just felt like there was a lot of escalation into really cool territory, but no real explanations or understanding. Just kind of, I don't know, just kind of weird. Also, it starts off sounding fairly okay, and then just out of the blue, oh, by the way, her parents are dead, and she hasn't been in the house ever since. Like, where did that come from? I feel like that should have maybe been established a little bit more, like ahead of time. I don't know. So it's not perfectly structured, I'll be completely honest, but I did find it more entertaining to read. So that's why I'm sticking with the 4 out of 5. Up next, we have Pseudo Right. Now, Pseudo Right doesn't actually do the full-on hardcore AI will do all the work for you thing, which I really appreciate. But it can help give you little ideas, it can help you kind of rewrite certain things. Like, it's a really useful writing prompt and writing assistant, but it doesn't do all the work for you, and I really appreciate that. Kind of like how Grammarly helps you as well. Similar concept, except this works a little bit harder, I've got to admit. So I'll go ahead and cover some of these ideas for you, because I found them to be quite interesting. So, the ghosts of Christmas past. A family inherits a house from a distant relative and discovers that it is haunted by the vengeful spirit of their ancestor who was wronged during Christmas many years ago. Alright, that's already quite good. In a small town, a family gathers for their annual Christmas Eve dinner. But as they sit down to eat, they realize that their meal has been replaced with human flesh. Now we're entering some more r/no sleep territory. But I gotta admit, quite nice, quite eerie, really fucking creepy. A family finds a strange present under their tree, with a tag that reads, "To whoever is reading this, you've been chosen to be our next holiday sacrifice." Yet again, still hitting the no-sleep territory, but I don't find that to be a problem. I find a lot of no-sleep stories can be quite good. Not all of them are amazing, so yet again, the prompt is good, but the story could have ended up bad. You know what I mean? A family gathers around the fireplace on Christmas Eve, only to find that their Yule log is made of human bones. That's one of those things where it's like, it makes you question, oh, okay, well, like, were the bones inside the log because it was burning and then they were revealed? Or did somebody just bring in bones? I mean, you have to choose to bring in a Yule log. You know, this is a thing we were talking about on Too Weird to Be True. And yeah, like you have to choose to bring it in. It's not like somebody brings you the Yule log. You have to choose to burn it yourself. It's like a whole thing. So I guess it depends on how that story decides to go. Interesting prompt, regardless. And a family receives a mysterious package in the mail containing a creepy, old fashioned cuckoo clock. As the clock strikes midnight on Christmas Eve, they began to experience strange and terrifying visions. I like how not all of these prompts are exactly the same. They're all fairly different enough that really kind of inspires you to go in certain directions, and I think that's is really well done. I've got to be honest. I like the fact that it doesn't do all the work for you. You can do thumbs up, thumbs down, depending on like whether you like it or not. And you can even try to pop some things in here. You can try to make little modifications. I like the fact that it doesn't do all the work for you, and I really appreciate that out of a robot. Up next, we have Quarkle. Now, similar to Pseudo Right, Quarkle doesn't quite do all the work for you. Granted, it does have more capability of doing things like that, but it won't do every single thing for you, like write the entire story out. You know what I mean? It does have a little chat bot assistant kind of mode, and as you can see here, it's kind of giving us a little bit of something to work with. I'll go ahead and read it for you. So the prompt yet again: create a Christmas horror short story. And it says, sure, I can help with that. How about a story where a family decides to cut down their own Christmas tree in a secluded forest, only to discover that the trees are alive and hungry for revenge? As they decorate the trees in their living room, strange things start happening. Ornaments shatter, lights flicker uncontrollably, and a chilling presence fills the house. The family soon realizes that they have awakened an ancient spirit that seeks to consume their holiday cheer in the most sinister way possible. Now, I gotta admit, it's pretty good. Are they like possessed spirits? Are they elementals? Are they dryads? Are they tree ants? Like, what are we? What? I guess it depends yet again how you want to delve into it, how you can connect it to a Christmas spirit of some kind. Because yet again, you want to still keep it in the lore and in the realm of Christmas horror, but it needs to make a level of sense, right? I think it's alright. I think it's an alright presence. I'm not entirely sure how I personally would make that into a really good story that kind of still fits in with some form of a Christmas heathen lore, whether it be, heathen, pagan, proper Christianity, whatever. So, hard to say. Last but not least, we have Google Gemini. So, yet again, prompt is the same: create Christmas horror short story. This is what it wrote. The snow fell in flat, lazy flakes, painting the already quaint village of Oak Haven in a thick, sugary coating. Christmas Eve. A time for warmth, carols, and the comforting glow of hearth fires. For Sarah, it was just another night of cold solitude. She hated Christmas. Not in the dramatic Grinch-like way, but with a quiet, gnawing resentment that had grown with each passing year since her parents, well, since they hadn't. This year, she'd decided, would be different. She'd finally finish her grandmother's old unfinished quilt. A tapestry of holiday scenes, its vibrant colors faded with time. It was supposed to bring good cheer. Sarah, however, felt nothing but a cold, hollow echo when she touched it. She huddled closer to the radiator, the old house groaning around her like a restless beast. The rhythmic thunk, thunk of the sewing machine was the only other sound. As she stitched a tiny, embroidered Santa onto the patchwork sky, a strange scratching began. It started softly, barely audible against the wind howling outside, then grew louder, persistent. It was coming from the attic. Sarah swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The attic was a place of shadows and forgotten things, a repository of her family's past, both joyous and painful. She told herself it was just mice, but the rhythmic scraping felt too deliberate, too calculated. She grabbed the old, rusty poker from beside the fireplace, the metal cold against her palm. With each creak of the staircase, her heart hammered against her ribs. She reached the attic door, its paint chipped and peeling like dried skin. The scratching intensified, now accompanied by a low, guttural groan. Taking a deep breath, she yanked the door open. The attic was shrouded in shadows, illuminated only by the pale moonlight flickering through a grimy window. Dust motes danced in the air, and the scent of mothballs and decay was heavy. And there, in the center of the room, stood a figure. It wasn't human, It was tall and skeletal, with limbs that were unnaturally long and thin. Its skin was a patchwork of different colors and textures, like pieces of cloth stitched together, and its head, a grotesque, misshapen thing, was crowned with a jumble of twisted branches adorned with small glittering ornaments. It wasn't a reindeer, but some monstrous parody of one. The creature's eyes, empty sockets that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, focused on Sarah. It let out another low groan and reached out a clawed hand, its fingers long and needle-like. Frozen in terror, Sarah could only stare. She recognized the fabric of its skin, pieces of the quilt, her grandmother's quilt. The creature took a step towards her, and Sarah finally understood. The quilt wasn't supposed to bring cheer. It was meant to contain something, and she, in her attempt to finally finish it, had inadvertently set it free. The branches on its head rattled with sound like dry bones. One of the small ornaments fell, shattering on the dusty floor. The creature let out a high-pitched, piercing shriek, and Sarah finally understood the purpose of the scratching. It was the sound of needle against bone, of thread being pulled taut, of the creature's gruesome rebirth. She dropped the poker, her scream swallowed by the attic's suffocating silence. The last thing Sarah saw before the creature engulfed her was the unfinished patch of the quilt, lying forgotten on the floor. The embroidered Santa stared blankly into the darkness, his jovial smile a mocking parody of the terror that had descended upon Oakhaven this Christmas Eve. The snow continued to fall, painting the village in its deceptive, pristine white, as the creature, stitched together with the remnants of a cursed holiday, prepared to spread its gruesome cheer. The night was far from over. Christmas had just begun. And I gotta admit, I quite liked this one. I'm definitely gonna give it a 4 out of 5, but it's not a perfect story. Let me kind of explain a little bit. So, I think the premise is great. I think the creature is awesome. It makes me think of like the skeletal horse out of like Welsh folklore, or the Nutupuki, for example, or maybe even a Wendigo in some depictions, not all. And that the detailing is good, the pacing is good, things align in the right kind of way. I don't feel like the story is, jumbling into weird timelines or whatever like that. It's I think my problem is the fact that it's being contained by the grandmother's quilt, right? And nobody thought it probably good to mention to Sarah that, oh hey, never finished this quilt. Maybe we should also not have it out in the open, because if you do, the thing in the attic, which has been living here for God knows how long, will come out and just, murder everybody. There's certain logics that are kind of dumb. But it feels like a no-sleep story, and, yet again, not every story has to make perfect sense. It's not perfectly logicked. It's fine. Overall, I think pretty good. I'm quite impressed. And there you have it. I've tested 5 different AIs, and I got a bit. They're not the worst. They're really not the worst, and that's a little more worrying than maybe it should be. I don't think it's going to replace anybody's, proper, full-on work anytime soon when it comes to at least writing stories, not proper novels and things like that. But I feel like it could put up a Reddit post or 2, and that's still a little troublesome if you ask me. But anyway, I've been Nate at Night, and I've had a fantastic time just playing around with stuff and reading a couple little stories. Let me know which one out of those you really like the most. Let me know if you want me to continue pursuing this, maybe figure out if it can write a proper whole novel, for example. Give me some prompt ideas if you want me to play around with it, and I'll try it again if you really like. Thank you ever so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye. Thank you to the YouTube and Patreon members who've been supporting this channel so far. This has been a fantastic effort. Thank you so much. I couldn't do any of this without your support. Really, I really can't. Thank you. Patreon now has exclusive ad-free videos. I know, quite a cool benefit, I gotta say. Can't do it on YouTube, sadly, just on Patreon only. It's a whole thing. There are many ways to support the channel, but becoming a member is probably one of the best ones. Support us today.